Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be back at Vancouver Community College. I don't think anybody in this room needed that talk from Gary more than I do, actually. It's great to be working with Gary again, and I'm dealing with the problems of change every day. And as Gary says, sometimes I'm a little over the top in trying to push people. Now, my wife asked me, she said, "Where are you going today?" And I said, "Oh, I'm going to Vancouver Community College." She said, "What are you doing there?" I said, "Well, I'm going to give a little talk." And she said, "What are you going to talk about?" And I said, "Technology and change." And she burst out laughing. And I said, "What are you laughing at?" She says, "Well, you were terrible at change." And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm really good at it." And she said, "Okay, go back 3 months when I suggested the bathroom reno." She said, "You were awful." So my wife has been trying to change me for 30 years, and after that 30-year period, I would give her an A for effort and C for success. So yes, change is great, and as Dilbert says, change is good, you go first. So anyway, with that, we'll move on. And I came across this. The Futurist magazine actually has been pretty good in getting predictions over the last 20 to 30 years, getting them right. And they come up with this one in 2010. The notion of class time as separate from non-class time will vanish. The next generation of college students will be living wherever they want and taking many, if not all, of their courses online. And self-directed learning will be the most important taught skill of the future. And I want to talk about that because I think it has some interesting implications, definitely, for a college. So in the overview, I want to talk about why change. I want to talk particularly about 21st century skills, some of the changes that have been happening in technology, what I call e-learning 1.0, which is the first version of e-learning, and e-learning 2.0, which is a new version of e-learning that's beginning to grow. And then relating that back to your everyday work, and particularly what kind of course should I be teaching now that we have all these things happening around us, and then some conclusions. So why change? Well, to be honest, we've had a massive change in post-secondary education over the last 30 to 40 years. We've moved from a pretty elite system to a mass system of higher education, and as a result, as teachers, we're expected to do more with less. We have different kinds of students to what we used to have. We have probably less resource per student, although governments will always point out they're increasing expenditure, but just not in relationship to the extra number of students that are entering the system. And students in technology are changing. The students are coming with all kinds of technology skills. They're coming with different attitudes to previously. Because they're paying higher fees, they have a certain, not sense of entitlement, but extra demands that they didn't have when they were more generously funded. We're seeing that the knowledge-based society requires skills as well as content, and this has implications for what students need to leave with when they finish their post-secondary education. But if we look at our teaching models, they haven't changed much from the 19th century. It's interesting to note that, I've forgotten his name, Thomas Huxley, who was one of the people who invented lab teaching. He worked at Oxford, and Oxford wouldn't accept experimental science approaches. It was mainly theology based in the mid-18th century. You remember the debate between Huxley and Bishop Wilberforce. So he had to create a new institution called the School of Engineering, which has now become Imperial College in London, because that was the only way he could teach empirical science, because he had to set up labs, and he got teachers to come in and taught them lab science. We still use that method today. It's a very good method, but it had to be invented because of the needs of the day. And I'm arguing that we need to invent new teaching methods to meet the needs of the 21st century that are similar but maybe slightly different to Thomas Huxley's. And lastly, can technology help with all these pressures? I believe it can, but if so, how? So let me say something first. I don't like the term 21st century skills because mainly when I put them up, you'll find academics particularly saying, well, we've always taught those skills. But they are somewhat different. Good communication skills, but adapted to the 21st century. There's a course at UBC now where their assessment is a course about setting up a business, right? How to set up a business. And the assessment is a 3-minute YouTube elevator pitch for the business. And they're assessed on how well they do that, because that's exactly the kind of communication skills they're going to need in the business world. So good communication skills, yes, we always teach that at university and college, but they have to be adapted to 21st century needs. Independent learning, as the futurist said, that's a critical factor. When you're in a job now, nobody's going to tell you what you have to know. You're expected to work it out for yourself. Ethics and responsibility, that's not changed a great deal. Teamwork. This is an interesting group. This is a design group contracted in by Volkswagen Motors. And I forget what they're designing. I think they're designing a fan of some kind. But they're doing this as a team. And they have all kinds of, as you see, technology that will help them communicate back with head office, with other people around the world who are experts in this area. Flexibility, ability to come in and do the job and get it done, whether it's 9 to 5 or not. I'll give you an example of that. I have a client who called me last night at 9:30 from Australia saying he wanted some information. He didn't have any clue what time it was in Vancouver. My wife gets calls at 4 o'clock in the morning and she has the phone on her bed and she hangs up. You know, she picks up the phone and hangs up. So, you know, there are certain things, but nowadays you're expected to be flexible and adaptable. Thinking skills. Now, we've always taught those, but things like critical thinking, problem solving and so on. Knowledge navigation, how to find, apply and use information. And all of these are connected to IT skills, but the critical thing is that these are not generic skills. They have to be embedded in a particular domain of knowledge. So problem solving in medicine is not the same as problem solving in business. Not only is the content base different, but the approach to problem solving is different. In medicine it's evidence based, and in business it's more risk based, almost the opposite. So they're not the same skills. They have to be embedded within the subject area. So here's some questions for you. Do you feel, I always ask this question because, you know, I'm never sure what's actually going on in the classroom because it's really hard to go around to all your classrooms and get a feeling of what's going on. But I'd like to ask your personal opinions on this. Not about yourself, of course, we know you're doing a great job, but maybe perhaps some of your colleagues, right? Are we teaching in ways that engage students and prepare them well for the 21st century? You know, we don't have clickers, so would you like to put the old-fashioned way, put your hands up, those who believe that statement to be true, that yes, we are engaging students and preparing them well for the 21st century. Put up your hands if you agree with that. Okay, and those of you who disagree with that, put your hands up. Yeah, interesting. Okay, and the second question is, do you feel that you or your colleagues probably are fully leveraging the potential of technology for teaching? Yes, hands up. No, hands up. Fully. Yeah. Interesting, right? Interesting. And lastly, do you feel instructors, other instructors, not you, are adequately trained or are skilled in using technology for teaching? How many of you feel that instructors are skilled and trained in using technology for teaching? Yes. No. Wow, that's even more. Now, isn't that interesting, right? Okay, so let's see. I'm going to come back and try and deal with those questions later. Let's look at changing technologies, and let's take the one that's probably most familiar to you all in the field now, is learning management systems. We're seeing a change now from having a course in a box, a virtual box, where you load everything into the learning management system and all the activities in there, now to a learning environment, a virtual learning environment that is a selection of tools and content that is organized in maybe a learning management system, but it's not a physical entity like Blackboard or Moodle. And even within the learning management system world, we're seeing this change happening. This is for the United States. That top line is Blackboard, and its percentage of the market is going down. And the bottom line, the red one is Moodle going up, and I know you use Moodle. That's for the US. We look at Canada, it's even more striking. The green is Moodle. 40% of all Canadian post-secondary institutions are using Moodle now. In British Columbia, it's much higher. Only 3 institutions now are not using Moodle in the post-secondary system in British Columbia. One of them is UBC. And you'll see that WebCT and Blackboard, WebCT is the blue and Blackboard is the sort of red. That's about 35%. So there are more people using Moodle than Blackboard now in Canada. And there are a lot of new entrants coming into the learning management system market. Instructure's Canvas, that's a screenshot from Canvas. Pearson's Open Class, Schoolology. ENA, that's a francophone learning management system developed at Laval University. Now, the main features of these new learning management systems is that they're much more loosely structured than Blackboard or even Moodle. They're cloud-based, in other words, they're not on the server in the institution, they're out there in the cloud somewhere. They're very low cost or free for the end user, and it's based on a service model. You take what you want and you pay for the service. And if you don't need a feature, you don't use it, and if you need other features, you just choose them and drop them in. And so it's a sort of pick and choose tools, and they're not selling these to institutions, they're getting individual instructors to adopt them, right? So you can go past your IT system now and see how far you get, right? Suddenly you find you log in the morning and there's nothing there. Now, at the same time, we're seeing this shift in the design of learning management system. This shift is very recent, it's in the last year or two. We're seeing a growth of tools that live outside the learning management system or are incorporated, or you link through a URL from the learning management system to the Web 2.0 tools. And I'm going to start off with blogs and WordPress particularly. WordPress is an open source content management system that allows the end user to create materials. And the example I've got from here is from a graduate course at UBC, eTech 522. And actually it's not very clear on this screen because it's so far away. But on the left-hand side is the content provided by the instructor, or the instructors, because there are 2 instructors on this course. And on the right-hand side is the content created by the students. In other words, students have project work, they post it up, and it's shared with the other students and so on. And because both the instructor and the student has the same tool, then and so what students do, they go out and do projects and they post the projects up and so on. So this is learner created content. And UBC has also got an extensive list of wikis. Now these are really interesting. I think this is probably one of the most interesting developments I've seen. What faculty have done, UBC created a situation where it's very easy for faculty to create their own wikis. So they have their learning management system in Blackboard and they got their course there, but the wiki is open unto the public in the sense that anybody can see what's in the wikis. And what they do, they ask students often to do projects and post them up in the wiki, or get them to take a topic and work together on that topic. And I can't remember which example I've got there, but the one I remember particularly is Latin American studies, where they started off having, in political science, they had some discussions about Latin American studies and they had some work there. What happened was professors from Latin America came across this site and started contributing material to the site. Now what you can do is to give authorized people access to the wiki so they can contribute directly. So you give them a password and they can come in. So you still control the access to the content, but it's public and you can share it. And so now students have suddenly got their courses open to the whole world to come in and talk about and discuss what they're studying. Growth of video and audio. Now, you've been using video quite well in Vancouver Community College, I know, because you have a program on automobile collision repairs, which has been using video to show simple processes for apprentices and so on. And we're seeing a great deal of expansion now. We're not using video and audio enough, but we're seeing it for a number of things. One is showing processes. Now, this is Bozeman